Hi, everyone. Today, we're diving into a story about quiet strength, unseen battles, and the moment a mother in uniform was told she didn't belong. But what happened next, it made people stop and rethink what respect really looks like. This isn't a courtroom drama or a viral rant. This is about what happens when someone keeps their promise in the face of disrespect and stands their ground without ever raising their voice. And here's the truth. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are and where are you watching from? Let's get into it. Naomi Rivers hadn't sat down in over 12 hours. Her back ached, her shoulders burned, and her boots dust-caked from the range at Camp Foster felt like they weighed an extra 5 pounds each. The California sun hadn't been kind either. It had left a fine layer of sweat and grime across her green fatigues, which were already faded from months of wear. At 42, she could handle it. She'd handled worse. But today wasn't just about endurance. It was about presence. She'd promised her son she'd be there when he walked that stage no matter what. Marcus had worked too hard for this day. No missed classes, no drama, just early mornings, late nights, and a quiet fire in his chest. Naomi knew what that kind of discipline looked like. It was the same one she carried through the ranks of the Marine Corps. The moment her shift ended, Naomi didn't hesitate. She didn't shower. She didn't swap her boots for sneakers or trade her utility blouse for something more presentable. There wasn't time for that. What mattered was the promise. Her son's graduation ceremony at Oceanside High started at 4:00 p.m. Her watch read 3:02. She jogged out of the barracks locker room, car keys in hand, windbreaker flapping behind her. The old Ford sedan coughed once before turning over. Traffic was already picking up near the harbor, but Naomi knew every back road and side street in the area. By 3:41, she pulled into the nearest patch of dirt near the back of the high school lot. A line of cars stretched all the way to the main road. Folding chairs dotted the football field. Red and white banners flapped lazily in the breeze. She could see people milling about, families taking photos, students fixing their gowns. Naomi looked down at her uniform. Dirt smudged the sleeves, and a faint line of grease from the armory marked her left shoulder. She pulled down the visor and stared into the tiny mirror. "This is fine," she said aloud, adjusting her name tape with 2 fingers. "I'm his mom. That's what matters." She stepped out, head high, boots crunching on gravel, and headed for the gate. The staff at the entrance barely glanced at her invite. A parent behind her muttered something under their breath. Naomi didn't catch the words, but the tone, she knew it. Still, she moved through the crowd like she was parting the sea, calm, steady, focused. Her neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, waved her down near the back row. Naomi smiled, made her way over, and took the empty folding chair beside her. "You made it," Mrs. Delaney whispered, squeezing her arm. "Barely," Naomi replied, catching her breath. The band was tuning up. A light breeze picked up, and the scent of sunscreen and cut grass drifted through the air. Naomi spotted Marcus right away, tall, lean cap, slightly off-center, standing near the gym entrance with the other graduates. His eyes scanned the crowd. She sat up straighter. Then came the interruption. 2 men approached from the left side of the seating area. Both wore dark navy polos with the school's security logo embroidered on the chest. One was young, early 20s, unsure of his steps. The other, older, broader, with a tight jaw and crossed arms, moved like he'd already made up his mind. "Ma'am," the older one began, "we need to speak with you for a moment." Naomi turned slowly. "Is something wrong?" "This area is reserved for parents and invited guests," he said. "We've had a few concerns reported. Just want to make sure everything's in order." Naomi blinked. "I am a guest. I'm Marcus Rivers' mother." The younger guard stepped forward slightly. "Do you have a ticket or something we can check?" She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the digital invite printed on standard paper. She handed it over calmly. The young guard examined it. The older one didn't even look at it. "An ID." She handed over her military ID card. There was a pause. A long one. The older man's eyes scanned her photo, then her uniform, then back again. He didn't blink. "We're going to need to double-check this with administration," he said. Naomi stayed seated. "You're welcome to do that. I'm not going anywhere." By now, the surrounding rows had started to quiet. A few heads turned. A woman in front pulled her purse closer. A child peeked between folding chairs. I'm asking you to step aside, ma'am, the older guard repeated, this time with a sharpness in his voice. Naomi didn't flinch. You can ask, but I've done nothing wrong. I'm staying right here. The tension hung like a thundercloud. Then from 3 rows up, a man stood. He was broad-bald, wearing khakis and a slate-gray polo. Sunglasses rested on the collar. She's not moving, he said loud enough for half the section to hear. The guards turned. Another man stood, then another, then one more. 4 in total, all built like men who didn't bluff. The first one stepped forward. Name's Master Chief Andre Lewis, he said calmly. And unless you want to make a bigger mistake than you already have, I suggest you take a breath and walk it back. The older guard's jaw clenched. Sir, this doesn't concern Lewis, cut him off with a glance. It does now. Naomi said nothing. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Not anymore. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of eyes watching, breaths held, and judgments forming faster than anyone could backpedal. Naomi sat still, spine straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. Around her, parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to pretend it wasn't happening or lean in closer. A few students on the edge of the staging area paused mid-laugh, sensing a disruption they didn't yet understand. The younger security guard fumbled with Naomi's ID again, as if the answer might change if he stared long enough. The older one turned toward the SEALs, visibly irritated but cautious. He knew enough not to bark at men like Andre Lewis. And Andre, he hadn't blinked once. I said, Lewis repeated, his voice low but firm, she's not moving. Another man stepped forward beside him, Latino, maybe mid-40s, arms crossed, expression calm but ready. Then came the third, Pacific Islander, barrel-chested, standing slightly behind the others like a wall. The fourth, lean and quiet, stood with his hands in his pockets, but his stance said everything. Problem, the second man asked, keeping his eyes on the guards. The older security guard tried to keep control of the situation, but the air had shifted. This was no longer just a routine check. This was a confrontation with witnesses. A man in the front row took out his phone. A woman 2 rows over whispered something to her teenage daughter, who began recording. Look, the older guard muttered, clearly rattled. Now we're just trying to do our jobs. Then do it better, Lewis replied. Because what I'm seeing, it's not professionalism, it's profiling. A ripple moved through the crowd at that word. Profiling. Naomi stayed silent, but her presence spoke volumes. Her dusty uniform, her quiet stillness, her patience. The younger guard's voice cracked. We should go talk to admin. At that moment, a school staff member jogged over, panting, walkie-talkie swinging from his belt. He wore a lanyard with the school's crest and a badge that read, Event Coordinator. Is there a problem here? He asked, glancing between the guards and Naomi. She doesn't have proper clearance, the older guard said quickly, trying to control the narrative. She has her son's invite and her military ID, Lewis cut in. You want to tell the crowd why that's not enough? The coordinator looked at Naomi, took the ID and invite, scanned them both quickly, then looked back at the guards. She's fine. She's cleared. Thank you, Staff Sergeant, he added with a nod. Please enjoy the ceremony. Naomi offered a small, polite smile. Appreciate it. The guards froze, unsure whether to apologize or slink away. They chose the latter, retreating back toward the fencing like shadows pulled away from the sun. The band began to play. The principal stepped to the mic. And as the first names were read, the crowd began to settle again, but the energy wasn't the same. People were watching Naomi now, some with admiration, some with guilt, some just trying to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Then 10 minutes in Marcus's name. He appeared from the gym tunnel, his black gown crisp, his cap now straightened. He walked tall, but as his eyes scanned the crowd, he paused. He saw the empty space beside his mom. He saw the lingering tension. And he saw the SEALs standing just behind her, like pillars of quiet resistance. His stride faltered, but only for a moment. Then he walked forward head high, shook the principal's hand, took his diploma, and offered a small, polite smile to the crowd. But Naomi knew that look, that slight narrowing of the eyes, that second glance toward the spot where the guards had stood. He'd seen it, all of it. Naomi stood and clapped just like the other parents, but her hands trembled slightly. When the ceremony ended, the crowd poured onto the field like a river breaking free of its banks. Kids screamed. Cameras flashed. Hug after hug. Naomi waited near the back, scanning the flow until she saw him, Marcus cutting through the crowd like a man with a mission. He didn't say anything at first, just walked right into her arms and hugged her. Not a quick squeeze, not a teen's awkward pat on the back, a full, locked-in embrace. He didn't let go. "I saw them," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "You didn't do anything." "No," she replied, "but sometimes that's not the point." A moment later, the school's vice principal appeared, clipboard in hand, suit jacket clinging to his damp shirt. His smile was thin, his eyes flicking around nervously as if calculating how much of this had been seen. "Ma'am," he said, extending a hand, "I'm Mr. Reynolds. First, congratulations on your son's achievement. We're all so proud." Naomi took the handshake, but her grip was firm, her eyes unblinking. "I also wanted to personally address the misunderstanding from earlier," Reynolds continued. "Our security team was just doing their due diligence. With everything going on these days, tensions are high. We have to be vigilant, you understand." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Tensions. Well, it's protocol, really," he replied quickly. "We regret if it came across the wrong way." Marcus, standing beside her, crossed his arms. It didn't come across the wrong way. It was the wrong way. Reynolds blinked. "I'm sorry you felt stopped," Naomi said quietly. "I didn't feel uncomfortable. I felt disrespected. That's different." "I see," he said, faltering. "You don't," she said, "but maybe now you will." Behind her, Master Chief Lewis stepped forward. "You should listen instead of defend," he said calmly. "Because the more you talk, the more this sounds like justification, not an apology." The vice principal's face flushed. "We'll follow up with the security firm. Retrain where needed." Lewis gave a single nod. "Good. Start there." Reynolds muttered another quick congratulations and turned away. Marcus leaned toward Lewis. "How do y'all do that? Just stand and everything changes?" Lewis smiled. "It's not about standing. It's about knowing when and why." The other SEALs nodded silently. None of them had shouted. None of them had demanded. But they had changed the entire course of the moment with their presence. Naomi exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The sun had started to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the football field, but the heat still clung to the air. The crowd buzzed with post-ceremony energy, families hugging balloons, popping phones held high to capture every fleeting second. But in the middle of it all, Naomi Rivers stood rooted in place. Not because she didn't want to move, but because something had shifted. People were noticing her now, but not with suspicion. There were nods of acknowledgement, glances that lingered longer than necessary, a few whispered words exchanged between strangers that ended with someone giving Naomi a quiet thumbs up as they passed. She hadn't spoken a word into a microphone, hadn't held a sign or raised her voice. And still, they saw her. From a few feet away, the girl with the phone, the one who had started filming the moment the guards approached, stood with her father. Her hands were still on the screen, face lit by the glow. Naomi could tell. The video was already live, already spreading. Marcus followed her gaze. "You think they're posting it?" "They already did," Naomi murmured. "Do you want her to take it down?" Naomi paused instinctively, reaching for the phone in her jacket pocket but stopping herself. "No," she said finally. "It's out now. People saw it." A few steps away, one of the SEALs, Louis the Pacific Islander, approached Marcus and handed him something small and folded. A fabric patch. Dark green, Velcro-backed. Stitched across the front were three simple words: "Own your ground." Marcus turned it over in his palm. "You guys all carry these." Louis gave a soft chuckle. "Only when someone earns it." Marcus didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly and tucked it into his pocket like it was something sacred. Naomi, standing a few feet away, caught sight of the two security guards again. They hadn't left. They stood near a clump of balloons and discarded programs, half shadowed by a folding chair rack. The older one shifted on his feet, arms now hanging limp at his sides. The younger one looked like he wanted to vanish. Naomi could have ignored them, could have kept walking. But that wasn't her. "I'll be right back," she said to Marcus. "You sure?" She nodded. "I'm not looking for a fight." As she stepped closer, the older guard straightened up. "Ma'am, I don't need a speech," Naomi interrupted softly. He nodded, looking down. I didn't know. I didn't look hard enough. I just assumed. You didn't listen either, she replied. The younger one stepped forward, voice quiet. I just followed his lead. I didn't stop to ask why. Naomi's gaze didn't soften. You don't owe me an explanation, but next time stop following. Start thinking. They nodded silent, not defensive, just learning. She turned and walked away without waiting for more. Back by the gates, Master Chief Lewis and the other SEALs were getting ready to leave. Their time in the spotlight, brief and unintentional, was over. They were already fading back into the background, the way they were trained to do. Quiet strength, never looking for credit. Lewis stepped closer to Naomi. You going to be all right? I always am, she said, her tone steady. He smirked. Still stubborn, and still tired, she smiled. But proud. More proud than tired. They shared a brief handshake, followed by a one-arm hug. You ever need backup? Lewis said you know where to find us? Next time we'll get there early and save your seat. Naomi laughed, really laughed for the first time all day. Appreciate you, brother. He tipped his head, turned, and walked off with the others. Marcus stood beside her, hands still deep in his pockets, the patch now clutched in one fist. You ever wonder, he said, if it would have been easier just to move, like let them sort it out later. Naomi looked at him carefully. No, she said after a beat, because if I let someone shove me out of a space I earned, how do I teach you to hold yours? He nodded. His face didn't say much, but Naomi knew the look. He was thinking, processing. They started walking toward the parking lot. The crowd was thinning now, families loading into cars, programs, fluttering like paper leaves across the pavement. Naomi's old Ford sedan sat exactly where she'd left it, in the dirt, crooked but solid. As they reached it, Naomi's phone buzzed in the center console. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A single text lit up. Ma'am, are you available for an interview regarding today's incident? Marcus peeked over. Media. She nodded. Probably some local station, or one of those news blogs that lives off drama. You going to answer? Naomi stared at the screen a second longer, then pressed the power button and tossed the phone back into the console. Not today. Why not? She turned to look at him. Because what matters already happened. You walk that stage. We held our ground. What else is there to say? Marcus smiled, not wide, not flashy, but full of something deeper. They pulled out onto the road. Naomi adjusted the rearview mirror. Behind them, folding chairs were being stacked. Balloons drifted low over the fence line. The last sliver of sunlight hit the hood of their car, gold and soft. Marcus leaned his head against the seat. You know, he said when the guy called you the silent sergeant, I thought it sounded kind of cool. Naomi chuckled. Fan clubs make me nervous. Still, they're not wrong. They drove in silence for a minute. Then Marcus said, you should talk about it. Maybe not on camera, but like at base, or with other moms. People who'd get it. Naomi didn't answer right away. Her thoughts drifted. Not to interviews or online posts, but to rooms with low ceilings and folding chairs. To young Marines just starting out. To women on base juggling diapers and deployments. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe someone needed to hear it, not shouted, but shared. She pulled out her phone at the next red light, opened a blank note, typed 5 words, hold your space. With love, saved it. That was enough for now. By the time Naomi and Marcus pulled onto the freeway, the last of the sun had dipped behind the horizon. The sky burned a soft orange near the edges, but gave way to deeper hues, cooler, quieter. Naomi drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, her fingers absently tapping along with the low hum of the radio. Marcus hadn't said much since they left the high school, but his silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. The kind of silence that wrapped itself around a person when they were putting together the pieces of something bigger than they'd expected. Naomi glanced at him briefly. His gown was folded in his lap, now his cap tossed onto the dash. He was scrolling through his phone, not fast, not aimlessly, just watching. They're already posting clips, he said, holding the screen slightly toward her. You're up to like 30,000 views. Naomi didn't even blink. Of course it's a thing. One corner of Marcus's mouth curled up. Comments too. People saying stuff like, she's what real service looks like. This is why we respect the uniform. Shame on those guards. Stuff like that. Naomi shook her head. Let's hope they mean it tomorrow too. Not just while it's trending. Marcus paused, then said more quietly, "Someone said you looked like a statue, that you didn't need to speak because your silence said everything." She let out a slow breath. Funny thing about silence. Sometimes it's louder than anything. He looked at her. "Were you scared?" That question came from a deeper place, and Naomi felt it. "No," she said. "I wasn't scared. I was tired and angry, but not scared." Why not? Because I wasn't the one doing something wrong. They passed an exit ramp where a billboard advertised a military scholarship program. Naomi pointed. "That's the one I told you about. The one with the letters of recommendation I said I'd help you with." Marcus nodded. "I remember. I've been thinking about applying." Naomi smiled to herself but didn't say a word. That was Marcus's way quiet contemplation, not needing a cheerleader, just room to decide. A few miles down, they pulled into a small gas station. Naomi stepped out to pump, while Marcus stayed in the car, still glued to his screen. From across the lot, she noticed a young couple near the ice machine. The man was raising his voice, gesturing, stepping forward. The woman didn't back down. She stood firm, arms crossed, voice calm but steady. Naomi couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She saw it in the posture, in the refusal to shrink. When she got back in the car, Marcus looked up. "Hey, quick question." "Shoot. What if nobody stood up for you today?" he asked. "What if those SEALs weren't there? What would you have done?" Naomi didn't answer right away. She put the car in drive and merged back onto the road. "I would have stayed right where I was," she said finally, "because that seat wasn't borrowed. It was mine. I didn't owe anyone proof to exist in it." Marcus nodded, turning that over in his head. "You know what I kept thinking about after he said, what would have happened if it was someone else? Someone who didn't have the uniform or the backup?" Naomi looked over at him. His voice had shifted again, deeper, sharper. This wasn't just a son reacting. This was a young man beginning to see the framework of the world more clearly. "Then it's up to people like us," she said, "to be the ones who stand up when they can't." They drove in silence for a few more minutes. A light drizzle began to dot the windshield, barely enough for wipers. Naomi turned the dial once, then again. "I kept thinking about my mom today," she said. "How many times she had to hold her ground in rooms where she wasn't wanted." Marcus looked at her. "She never raised her voice either," Naomi added, "but she never moved an inch." He let out a soft laugh. "So stubbornness runs in the family." Apparently she smirked. Another buzz from the console. Naomi glanced at her phone, another unknown number. This one had left a voicemail. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That them again," probably, Naomi said. "Everyone's got something to say once the moment passes." She picked up the phone, opened a blank email draft instead of playing the message. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. Naomi stared at the screen, then started typing. "To Family Support Group Lead, Camp Foster's subject speaking request. Hi, my name is Staff Sergeant Naomi Rivers. I'd like to speak with some of our new recruits and, if possible, any mothers or caregivers in the support network. No slideshow, no podium, just a circle and a conversation about presence and holding your space, especially when others try to erase it. Let me know what works." She hit save as draft and closed the screen. "You going to send it?" Marcus asked. Naomi thought for a second. "Not tonight, but soon." He nodded. "I think people need to hear it, like the way you handled it. Not loud, just like you." She gave a small smile. "Think the guards are thinking about it right now," Marcus added. "I hope so," she said. "That's where change starts. Not in the spotlight, in the afterthoughts. When you're lying in bed and realizing you didn't ask the right question or didn't bother asking one at all." They passed another sign. This one read, "Welcome to Camp Pendleton, East Gate." Naomi exhaled. Home. As they neared the base housing entrance, Marcus looked over. "You ever think about what would have happened if they hadn't believed you? If they hadn't checked with admin?" Naomi tightened her grip on the wheel. "Then they would have embarrassed me in front of my son," she said, "but they still wouldn't have erased who I am." Marcus looked down at the patch in his hand again. "You ever get scared that one day I'll have to deal with something like that?" Naomi didn't respond right away. She pulled into their driveway, shut off the engine, and looked over at him. "I don't get scared," she said softly. "I get ready, and I teach you how to be ready too." Marcus nodded again. The light from the porch flickered on automatically as they stepped out. Inside the house smelled like lemon oil and old books. Naomi dropped her keys into the bowl by the door. Marcus placed his cap and gown gently over the couch arm. There was something sacred about that motion, like he was preserving a piece of the day dust and all. Naomi walked to her room, peeled off her windbreaker, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her boots were still dusty, her sleeves still smudged, but her heart, it was full. The next morning came quietly. No alarms, no early shifts, no urgent inspections. Just the hum of a ceiling fan overhead and the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Naomi lay still for a few moments, eyes half open, listening to the peacefulness that followed a storm. Not the kind with thunder and wind, but the kind where truth breaks through silence and the air afterward feels different. She rolled out of bed, every muscle sore from the day before, but in the best way. The kind of sore that told you something mattered, that you showed up and didn't flinch. In the kitchen, Marcus was already up, still in his pajamas, sitting at the table with his laptop open and his phone beside him. He looked up when she walked in, eyes clearer than she expected for an 18-year-old on a Saturday. "Morning," he said. "Barely," she replied, checking the time. 10:22 a.m. Practically afternoon. She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching him scroll. "They're talking about you," he said. "Still. Like blogs, forums, even one of the military Facebook pages. They're calling it the Stand in Section B." Naomi nearly choked on her sip. "What, yeah? Someone made a hashtag." "I don't want a hashtag," she said, laughing quietly. "Well, you've got one. Too late." He turned the screen toward her. A still photo of her sitting in the folding chair uniform, dusty face calm, arms folded. The guards blurred in the background, the SEALs half rising behind her. The caption, "Dignity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stays seated." Naomi stared at it, not out of pride, but out of a strange sense of detachment, like she was watching someone else, someone she barely remembered being, even though it was only yesterday. Marcus hesitated before speaking again. The school made a post, too. Naomi raised an eyebrow. They issued an apology. Public. Said they're reviewing event security protocols and committing to staff sensitivity training moving forward. They even mentioned you by name. She sipped her coffee again. "Too little, too late," maybe Marcus said, "but it's more than most people get." She walked over to the table and sat across from him, her hands wrapped around the warm mug. "Did I ever tell you," she began slowly, "about my first week in the Corps?" Marcus shook his head. "There was this gunnery sergeant woman named Peterson. Short, white, talked like sandpaper. On my second day, I tripped during an inspection and spilled my tray in front of a whole room. She didn't yell, didn't curse, just looked at me and said, 'You dropped the tray, Rivers. Not your dignity. Now clean it up like a Marine.'" Marcus smiled. "I never forgot that. I figured if she could hold her ground in a room full of heat and noise, then I had no excuse." Marcus leaned back. "So that's where it comes from." "Partly, the rest came from life." Her phone buzzed on the table. This time the number was familiar. It was Sergeant Daniels from Camp Foster. He oversaw the mentoring program for young recruits. She let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Rivers," she said. "Hey, Staff Sergeant." "Morning. Listen, I saw the video, and I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to speak at the next orientation week. Nothing formal. Just a few words to the recruits about what it means to serve both in and out of uniform." Naomi didn't answer right away. She looked across the table at her son, who nodded like he already knew what she was going to say. "Yeah," she replied. "Yeah, I'd be honored." Daniels exhaled in relief. "Thank you. You've got people talking in the best way." She smiled faintly. "Let's make sure it leads to something better." After the call, Naomi stood and walked over to the hallway closet. From the top shelf, she pulled down a thin box and opened it on the table. Inside were patches, commendations, and a few old photographs, some in color, some in black and white. She pulled out one patch, the old weathered one from her mother's nursing days, faded but intact. She slid it across the table to Marcus. "Here, to go with the one they gave you yesterday." Marcus looked at both patches side by side. One said, "Own your ground." The other, embroidered in pale blue thread, read, "In every storm stand." Thanks, Mom, he said quietly. Naomi looked out the window. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the edge of the old flag hanging from their porch post. It wasn't flying bold like it did on sunny days. Today it fluttered low, steady like it was holding position. She didn't need a speech or a news story or a viral moment. She needed this, her son, the truth, and the seat she'd refused to give up. Because sometimes the loudest message is the one you never planned to deliver. It's just there, firm-rooted, undeniable. And if someone ever asked her what she did to earn all this attention, she'd smile and say, I sat down.